Hey guys, it's Jay. A lot of talk over the last couple of weeks about Governor Chris Christie out of New Jersey and his decision to have lapband surgery. He actually had it back in February. He's lost about 40 pounds so far. But obviously a guy like that going public brings out a lot of criticism. And I've been watching late night hosts and Twitter, comedy feeds, and Bill Maher last weekend, all of them cracking jokes about this overweight governor. Now, he's been the subject of fat jokes for years. That's nothing new. But what's pissing me off now is that he's being mocked for his decision to do something about it. What Bill Maher actually said, and I want to be clear, he's a comedian. I'm not saying comedians don't have some room to play with these things. Of course they do. I even ran into that myself. I'm fine with that. It's just how people cope. And honestly, it's only by people like Governor Christie stepping up and being public about this that there can be a broader conversation about it so that eventually it stops being okay to mock people who make this decision. So if you look at Chris Christie, what Bill Maher said on HBO the other night was that a fat guy having his stomach tied off as a way of coping with being fat is like a coke addict saying he's dealing with his addiction because he had his nostrils glued shut, right? That's his take on this. Now, obviously, this all comes down to questions about control. And on that end, I really do think that we're missing the mark. I mean, the lap band doesn't necessarily make weight loss easier. It makes portion control easier. It makes the intake of food a more controlled thing. But you still got to get off your ass and move. Chris Christie lost 40 pounds the same way that you would. The only way you can lose a pound is to burn 3,500 calories. So far in my journey, I've burned 700,000. It's the only way you can do it. Now, in talking about people who are out of control with their eating, what some of these people are missing is that there are a whole bunch of ways to have unhealthy relationships with food. In fact, in my blog, I haven't spent a lot of time talking about what my relationship was with food before I had the surgery. Actually, before I started this whole journey about 14 months ago. Part of the reason I didn't share mine was honestly just because it's the most embarrassing part of this entire thing. But secondly, I didn't want people thinking that they didn't have a problem just because they didn't have my problem. There are lots of ways to overeat and to support your obesity. And it doesn't mean they're healthy just because you don't have mine. I wasn't an emotional eater. I didn't eat because I was happy or sad or because I had a good day. I didn't have cookies under my bed, and I never kept candy or anything like that in my desk at work. I was a binge eater. I would hit up a drive-thru and order 5 breakfast sandwiches. I would hit up McDonald's and get myself 6 double cheeseburgers. That's 12 patties. And what I would do just to be sneaky is I'd order 3 of those with no pickle, just so the woman working the drive-thru would think that they were actually for 2 different people. I was a binge eater because that was what I had to do to keep the life and the body that I had to justify the disconnect I had from the normal life. I mean, inherent in my admission to have weight loss surgery, inherent in that decision is an admission that I'm not able to do what the vast majority of you are able to do, and that's have a normal relationship with food. I was absolutely a binge eater. I was absolutely happy to be fat and happy to be getting fatter because it justified my being abnormal. I didn't have to have normal relationships. I didn't have to follow the normal rules of life as long as I wasn't normal. And when I would go to a drive-thru and I would order that kind of food and I would go park behind a grocery store beside a car corral and, eat it all with the grease dripping down my wrist, just absolutely disgusting. I would hate myself the entire time. But I knew that it's what I had to do to justify this whole life that I had built around me, where I was the fat guy who was removed from everything, who was disconnected, who didn't care. I mean, that every bite was another inch closer to death. And whether I was that blatantly honest with myself about it or not, that was my plan. I was binge eating because I was done with life. I was binge eating because it was a way out. Because surely death was easier than life at 460 pounds. One of the most constant things I hear now is how hard it must have been to lose the weight. And it is hard. I mean, like I said, there's only one way to lose weight. You got to burn calories for every pound. You got to move more than you eat. You got to change your relationship with food. None of that is easy. And I don't mean to sound trivial in any way about this, but that's not the hard part. The hard part was living at 460 pounds. It was hard to get a shower. It was hard to tie my shoes. It was hard to buy clothes. It was hard to get dressed. It was hard to maintain relationships. I couldn't walk to the end of the driveway. There were entire aisles at the grocery store I wouldn't shop in because I didn't want to walk to that end of the store. I can't imagine anything I do in my life ever being harder than what sustaining life was like at 460 pounds. So when people talk now about Chris Christie and whether he's doing this because he wants to run for the presidency, I don't believe that. I don't think you make this decision for something like that. And I'll tell you why. That makes it sound like there was a plan, right? And inherent in getting fatter, of staying in that life where you are obese and you're doing the things that you have to do to maintain that weight and to actually grow larger like he has. You're not counting on a future. Just like I was sitting in the parking lot eating those burgers, you are assuming that there is no future. You are doing everything you can to walk toward a sure future. You're ending it. That's your whole point. Because here's what no one has said, and that I firmly believe. Obesity is just the slowest, most socially acceptable form of suicide we have. Nobody likes to think of it like that. And there are lots of other disorders, there are lots of other relationships with food. But if you're a binge eater, if you're doing the stuff that I did, that's suicide. You know the end game. And at some point it's going to click for you or it's not. So is Chris Christie doing this because he wants to be president? I have no idea. I doubt it. I can't imagine that he's planning anything that far in advance, especially when he's only down 40 pounds and is still a very unhealthy man. But I think he could do it. If there's one thing I've learned, if you look at him, what he was able to pull off even with the obesity issue, I even feel like this in my own life. I was able to achieve some impressive things even with my weight. As much as I'd given up on life and there were things that I just, had disconnected myself from, I still managed to hold down a good job. I was still an incredibly hard worker. I was dedicated. Part of my condition was throwing my energy into those parts of my life where I was engaged and then using and getting that energy to do that because I was so disconnected from everything else. So can he be president? I have to say, if he was able to become governor with the weight issue, I can't imagine how strong a man he is going to be when he gets the weight off of him. I'm only starting to realize now what I'm capable of. And no, that doesn't mean I'm ever going to be president of the United States. There's a couple of things that are going to keep that from being true. But, I have no idea what's in store for this guy. But anyone who thinks that his choice was the easy way out has no idea what they're talking about. Because this is by far an incredibly difficult thing. But it's not nearly as difficult as doing what he's done now, which was maintain that job and a family and be in the media every day and have everybody watching you and know that with every bite, you're trying to end it all. That, I guarantee you, is much harder. That's what I think.